Hello folks, and welcome to our post-game show. The Union just took on the Confederates and came out with a W. Now let's dive into the contributing factors that resulted in this Union victory.
Now, starting out the game, it looked like the Union had a clear advantage over the South just due to the size of their team. There were 22 million people in the North and 2.6 million of them were soldiers. Likewise, there are plenty of immigrants that partook in the war, and 180,000 African Americans that joined the Union Army after the Emancipation Proclamation in 1863.
Unfortunately for the South, they only had a population of 9 million, and about 1/3 of them happened to be slaves who weren't exactly jumping at the chance to fight alongside their oppressors. Additionally, the South had less than half the amount of soldiers as the Union, with only 1.2 million soldiers.
But even though the Union clearly had a greater population than the Confederates, they just didn't know their way around. The Confederates were playing on their home turf, which was a defensive war for them. A major disadvantage for the Union was that they had an unfamiliar turf that they were playing on and poor communication.
This is our turf! I just don't know my way around. Wait, no guys, don't go that way, go this way.
Luckily for the Union, they could count on a loyal U.S. Navy, which controlled the rivers and territorial waters, unlike the South, who had a very small navy.
Now let's talk about the coaching leadership.
Well, the South definitely had the upper hand in this piece of the game. Robert E. Lee was a top-ranked coach who was offered to join the Unions by Abraham Lincoln himself. He ended up declining the Northerners and became the head coach of the Confederacy, beside their president Jefferson Davis, who, by the way, had terrible leadership skills, unlike Abraham Lincoln, who was a great leader.
Alright, y'all. Been a Confederate fan my whole life. I may not agree with all of their ideals, but as a Virginian, I can't abandon my team now. Yeah! Also, 7 out of the 11 military colleges were in the South, which allowed Confederates to learn strong military traditions. Additionally, most military officers from the South had experience from the Mexican War.
What the was that? Pieces of drop and give me 50! Get up! Come on, push it! Get lower!
More. They also had good guns and horses.
As a result, while the Confederates had an outstanding military leadership, the North was clearly lacking in the coaching department.
This weakness was showcased during the Union's struggle to find a good coaching staff. They cycled through many head coaches like Winfield Scott, George B. McClellan, and William Tecumseh Sherman, who just weren't aggressive enough in the game before they settled on Ulysses S. Grant. This became a turning point in the game, allowing the Unions to take a lead. Ulysses S. Grant was so aggressive on offense that he believed that if it took 3 Union players to take down 1 Confederate player, it would be worth it.
You're fired.
fired. Guess what? You're fired. Grant, I know you'll do what it takes for the Union to win.
Yes, sir.
You're my man.
The art of war is simple enough. Find out where your enemy is, get him as soon as you can, strike him as hard as you can, as often as you can, and keep moving on.
Side note, the North dominated the nation's economy by controlling 85% of factories, 70% of the railroads, and 65% of farmland. This helped the Union out in the game because they had plentiful supplies of water and food when they were playing, unlike the South, where all they had was cotton, and you can't eat cotton.
Duh.
Agricultural society! I can't drink cotton!
We had the poorest commissionary arrangements, and all I could get from my men were salt and hard crackers. I made the convalescents shoot squirrels and groundhogs, pheasants and turkeys, with which to make soup for the men.
Hey, can I have some?
No.
I'm so hungry!
Since the North had all the industries to supply their team, the South wanted to trade with them, but the North obviously declined. Since the North would not trade with them, they had to look for resources elsewhere, so they turned to England for resources and an alliance.
Unfortunately, England also denied the South because England was already trading cotton with India and Egypt. And England disapproved of the South's reason to win this game. They thought slavery was morally wrong.
Confederates hoped that European demand for its cotton would bring recognition and financial aid. Like other rebel moments in history, the Confederates counted on outside help to be successful.
Can we have some food? No.
Can we have any resources at all?
No. Can we have an alliance? No! Slavery is morally wrong! Correct. England thought that slavery was morally wrong and denied the South for help in this game. On the other hand, the South had stronger motivation to win, and this was despite all of their disadvantages. Confederates were playing for their way of life, plantation life, and the economy, whereas the Union had a weaker motivation to fight. At the beginning of the war, Lincoln claimed that Northerners were simply fighting to keep the Union together, but after the Emancipation Proclamation, the issue of slavery took over. The Confederates' motivation greatly overpowered the Unions, who couldn't rally together behind the issue of unity or the peculiar institution.
What the heck? Meerkat!
Okay.
What are you guys doing? Get up! Come on, let's guys. What are you guys doing? Get up! Come on, get up!
There's nothing to fight for!
Another advantage the North had was they had the one and only Abraham Lincoln. He was the president during this time, and he was remembered in history as the great emancipator. Northerners had a luxury of a strong central government and paper currency, unlike the South.
Even though the Confederates started out the game with the lead, the Union finished strong for the win under the leadership of Ulysses S. Grant.
Thank you for watching Civil Sports Center. We'll catch you next week.